Hello, you are most welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Real Impartation Moment on Tuesday Night Anatomy with Daniel Okwan. Today's section, we continue with our developmental anatomy, and this time around, we look at development of the tongue. And so, without much ado, let's set the ball rolling. Now we know that from the gross anatomy viewpoint, we know that tongue is going to have an anterior 2/3 and of course a posterior 1/3 component. And you get to know that yes, all these components, both of these components will be coming from some portion of what we call the pharyngeal arches that we've already looked at. So please, if you not watch the bronchial arches anatomy that we've looked at, please get that video link and of course watch it so that you can get more insights regarding the development of the tongue. Now actually, in the head and neck region, I told you that yes, forming important structures there will be, of course, the bronchial arches. One of these important structures we are talking about is the tongue. Okay, now one thing is that yes, we know that these bronchial arches, they are of course 5. Originally they used to be 6. Of course, the 5th one disappears. So these bronchial arches, of course, they are also bilateral. So we have one on the left, one on the right. Now, assuming that I'm looking at it from, taking a posterior view, what happens is that, yes, posteriorly, these bronchial arches, they are not related, but anteriorly, they tend to come closer and then fuse together. Now, one thing is that development of the tongue from the gross anatomy point of view, the anterior 2/3 of the tongue will be coming mainly from the first bronchial arch or the first pharyngeal arch. Why? Because in the first bronchial arch developing over there will be something we call lateral lingual swellings. Okay, so one over here, lateral lingual swellings. And then there will be another one who is a median, lingual bud. And that's what we call tubercular impar. But what happens is that this tubercular impar, yes, contributes very little because there will be overgrowth of these lateral lingual swellings to overshadow this tubercular impar. So please get to know that. Okay, and then also you get to know that that's why you should know that the epithelial lining, although yes, the epithelial line of the tongue is going to be stratified squamous, non-keratinized epithelium, except in the case of where we have the filiform papillae. Yes, we'll get to know that because it's been developing from of course the first bronchial arch, then the epithelial lining of what we call the anterior 2/3 of the tongue, yes, will be ectodermal in origin. Okay. Just behind that, we have the foramen cecum, and we know this foramen cecum will make way for the diverticulum to move in there. Okay, when we look at the development of the tongue, we will also mention this foramen cecum once again. Okay, now developing, so this lateral lingual swellings with little contribution coming from the tuberculum impar will lead to the formation of the anterior 2/3 of the tongue. Now, for the posterior 1/3 of the tongue, yes, together with of course the epiglottis, because they will be connected by this kind of valleculae. Over there, what we are saying is that this posterior 1/3 of tongue will be developing within, of course, the 3rd and then the 4th arch. But of course, yes, some books will bring in the 2nd arch, but only that you have to know that there will be overgrowth of this structure over here, which we call it hypobronchial eminence, or something we call copula. Okay, there will be that kind of overgrowth so that it covers this 2nd arch. So as far as the tongue development is concerned, yes, the 2nd arch has no role to play over there. Okay, so that is what I want you to know. So schematically, what are we saying? We are saying that the tongue, yes, it will be coming from, of course, we have from the first bronchial arch, we have what we call the lingual swellings developing. Around the 4th week of intrauterine life, we have these lingual swellings appearing, and these lingual swellings, because they are laterally placed from either side, we call them lateral lingual swellings. And then there will be another structure which is formed between these lateral lingual swellings, and that is what we call the median lingual bud. And this median lingual bud is something we call tuberculum impar. And then I told you that there will be overgrowth. Yes, so I'll show you what happens. There will be overgrowth. Yes, so that essentially this tuberculum impar will contribute very little to, of course, this anterior 2/3 of the tongue. So one thing is that these lateral lingual swellings will have to unite, okay, to form this kind of tongue that we find. But failure or non-fusion entirely of these lateral lingual swellings may lead to what something we call, bifid tongue. So we expect bifid tongue in, something like, snakes, but in human beings we don't expect to see this kind of bifid tongues, or in mammals. But what happens is that failure of the fusion of these lateral lingual swellings will lead to, of course, the bifid, tongue. Now, I told you that developing in the third and then the fourth arch, yes, will be, this thing we call hypobranchial eminence, something we also call copula. Now, the cranial portion of this copula or the hypobranchial eminence will lead to the formation of the posterior 1/3 of the tongue. The caudal portion, yes, will lead to the formation of the epiglottis. So please get to know that. So essentially, as you can see, this portion is going to lead to the formation of the epiglottis, but the posterior 1/3 proper, yes, is coming from, of course, the cranial portion of the hypobranchial eminence. Then we also saw that, yes, if you saw the foramen cecum, okay, the foramen cecum, yes, for the fusion. Now what happens is that the anterior 2/3 is also going to fuse with, of course, the posterior 1/3. And then that point of fusion, at that point, that junction is marked by this median structure, which we call foramen cecum. And then, of course, yes, from either side laterally, okay, projecting from the foramen cecum laterally, is what we call the terminal sulcus, or sulcus terminalis. And so this, with the help of the sulcus terminalis together with the foramen cecum, we're able to get the anterior 2/3 of the tongue. And then we're also able to get the posterior 1/3 of the tongue. Remember that the anterior 2/3 of the tongue is actually the oral portion of the tongue, with the posterior 1/3, yes, being, of course, the pharyngeal portion, or something we call the root of what we call the tongue. The interesting thing is that if you look at the anterior 2/3 of the tongue, the anterior 2/3 of the tongue is flanked by something we call primary papillae. Okay, those kind of, reddish, or let me say pinkish and whitish structures that we find on the dorsum of the anterior 2/3 of the tongue. Yes, they are what we call the primary papillae. Now the primary papillae, we talk about foliate, we talk about filiform, we talk about fungiform. Okay, but the fourth one, which is called the circumvallate, which runs along, okay, the sulcus terminalis, although it's found in the anterior 2/3 of the tongue, you can see the color is not having the same consistency over here. That one is also developed from what we call the cranial portion of the hypobranchial eminence. So please get to know that. And of course, you know that this hypobranchial eminence, that one will begin to develop around the 5th to 6th weeks of intrauterine life, after the lateral lingual swelling has emerged around the 4th week of intrauterine life. So what are we saying? In simple terms, we are talking about the tongue, and we said that tongue, okay, coming from the first, pharyngeal arch, will be the lateral lingual swellings, and then there will be a median lingual bud, and that is what we call tuberculum impar, essentially contributing very little because there will be overgrowth of this lateral lingual swellings, okay, so that we form the anterior 2/3 of the tongue. And I've told you that the epithelial line, because it's coming, because we said that in the first pharyngeal arch, the only exception is that, yes, unlike the remaining portions of what we call the arch that we said medially, it will be covered by endoderm. The first pharyngeal arch on both sides, laterally and medially, will be covered by what we call ectoderm, and that is why the epithelial lining of the anterior 2/3 of the tongue, although it is stratified squamous non-keratinized epithelium, it is still going to be ectodermal in origin. So that is, what I want you to know. And then we said that there will be a foramen cecum. Behind the foramen cecum, yes, we are saying that, yes, this is the second pharyngeal arch. But what do you see? Look at the color over here, critically. Now, what you find is that developing within the third and fourth pharyngeal arch will be the hypobranchial eminence. And this hypobranchial eminence, cranial portion of the hypobranchial eminence, yes, is leading to the formation of the posterior 1/3 of the tongue. So there will be that kind of overgrowth. So you can see that this color, this blue color over here, it has been overshadowed by the color over here, which I've labeled 4. That is the cranial portion of the hypobranchial eminence. Now, the one over here, which is yellow in color, yes, will lead to what we call the epiglottis. And it's still part of the hypobranchial eminence, but we can also call it, the epiglottic, swelling. Okay, so that is, what I want you to know. I said that yes, there will still be that foramen cecum because these things are going to fuse. When they fuse, yes, the point of fusion, median at the median point is the foramen cecum, and then laterally, yes, we will have what we call the sulcus terminalis, separating them. I said that is the anterior two tiers of the tongue, that is the oral cavity proper, and then this is the pharyngeal component of what we call the tongue, okay, or forming what we call the root of the tongue. Now, some people will bring in the concept of the posterior most, component of the tongue. Now, the posterior most component of the tongue is that connection between, of course, the posterior one third of the tongue and the epiglottis, because they will be connected by this kind of valleculae. Okay, so you can bring in the concept of posterior most component of the tongue together with the epiglottis, coming from, of course, the caudal portion of the hypobranchial eminence or the copula. Okay, so that is that one. But I told you that the epithelial lining of the anterior two thirds of the tongue will be, ectodermal in origin. That of posterior one third will be endodermal in origin, because of course the remaining portion, yes, medial will be covered by what we call endoderm. Okay, so that is that one. Now, having seen these things, then let's look at the logic behind some of these things. That we say that the anterior two thirds of the tongue, general sensation is coming from, of course, the lingual, branch of what we call the mandibular nerve. Lingual branch of the mandibular nerve. Okay, the third division of the trigeminal nerve. Why? Because we said that, these nerves that supply the pharyngeal arches, they are actually post-traumatic nerves. Okay, except the first pharyngeal arch, which I'll come to. And the first pharyngeal arch, yes, its post-traumatic nerve is the mandibular nerve, but specifically is the lingual branch of what we call the mandibular nerve, supplying this first pharyngeal arch. Therefore, the general sensation to anterior two tiers of the tongue will be coming from the lingual branch of the mandibular nerve. However, in case of what we call, special sensation by way of taste, it will be coming this time around from what we call the cauda tympani branch of the facial nerve. Remember that we said that the facial nerve is a nerve to the second pharyngeal arch, but it gives a pre-traumatic nerve, okay, which we call the cauda tympani branch of the facial nerve, and it's also a nerve of what we call the first pharyngeal arch, although it's a branch of facial nerve. So please, if you want to really understand these things, then visit that video which I did on what we call the pharyngeal arches. Okay, so that is what we find over here. Now, in the case of what we call the posterior one third of the tongue, both general and of course taste sensation or special sensation will be coming from what we call the glossopharyngeal nerve. Okay, please get to know that glossopharyngeal nerve, the posterior one third of the tongue. Now, if you look at, we said at the hypobranchial eminence, we are going to have the cranial portion. The cranial portion is in the third arch, and that is why it's coming from, of course, the glossopharyngeal nerve, cranial nerve 9. Now, the cranial nerve 10 will supply that of what we call the epiglottis together with the posterior most component of the tongue, by way of the vallecula. Okay, why? Because that one, the cranial portion, the caudal portion will be developing in what we call the fourth pharyngeal arch. And the nerve to the fourth pharyngeal arch is the vagus nerve, but specifically we are looking at what we call the superior laryngeal branch, okay, of the vagus nerve. But actually the internal laryngeal nerve will be supplying, of course, the epiglottis and the posterior most component of the tongue. So that is what I want you to actually know. So in summary, what have we seen? We said that the anterior two tiers of the tongue, except the circumvallate or the valate papillae, yes, will be developing from what we call the lateral lingual swellings together with the tuberculum impar in the first branchial arch. And that is why the first, the general nerve supply will be coming from the lingual branch of the mandibular nerve, okay, the third division of the trigeminal nerve. But special sensation will be coming from its pre-traumatic nerve, which is the cauda tympani branch of the facial nerve. So please, that is, what I want you to actually know. Okay. And then if you look at the posterior one third of the tongue, this time around, including the circumvallate papillae, your general sensation as well as special sensation by way of taste will be coming from the glossopharyngeal nerve, cranial nerve 9. Okay, so please get to know that. And because we have told you where it is coming from, because it's coming from, of course, I mean, the hypobranchial eminence, which develops, okay, the cranial portion which develops actually in what we call the third arch. And then the posterior most, together with, of course, the, I mean, by way of the vallicular, and then of course the, the epiglottis, okay, internal laryngeal nerve, which is a branch of superior laryngeal nerve, which is also a branch of what we call the vagus, yes, will be supplying that, because that's the caudal portion of what we call the hypobranchial eminence. But remember that the muscles, okay, of what we call the tongue, okay, will be derived from the myoblast of what we call the occipital somite. So they will migrate, from the occipital region, towards cranially, and then, I mean, anterior to, I mean, form what we call the muscles of the tongue, and the muscles of the tongue, be supplied by, of course, the, I mean, the 12th cranial, nerve, hypoglossal nerve. Now, having seen this, then let's look at some developmental anomalies. Now, some people may not have tongue at all, and that is what we call aglossia. Okay, so aglossia, yes, and it's also often associated with other developmental anomalies of the face. So aglossia, no tongue at all in the oral cavity. Okay, so that is, I mean, what we see. Now, another thing is what we call bifid or the cleft tongue. So bifid tongue, for instance, if there's no development of what we call lateral lingual swellings, tuberculum impar, together with the hypobranchial eminence, yes, then no tongue formation at all. However, if the lateral lingual swellings fail to fuse in the midline, then bifid tongue, results. Okay, now then another thing which you call it, tongue tie. I'll show you in another image, tongue tie. Okay, in such a case where, I mean, instead of, now let me use this image to show it to you. Now this is the tongue. Now what happens is that after the tongue is formed, what will happen is that there will be degeneration of most of these tissues over here, except at the midline, where there will be this kind of mucosal fold connecting it to the floor of the oral cavity. Okay, but what happens is that in some individuals, this, I mean, mucosal fold extends all the way even to the tip of the tongue, and that one is what we call, I mean, tie tongue. Okay, or tongue tie, which otherwise we call it ankyloglossia. Okay, ankyloglossia. And this one, yes, it has, a lot of issues regarding, speech. And then, yes, even apart from aglossia, yes, you may also have microglossia. And micro, yes, has to do with small. Macroglossia can also happen where the tongue will be very big. And it's all about, the development of these, I mean, structures that we looked at. Lingual swellings, if they are very small, forming it, hypobranchial eminence. If all these developmental problems, yes, happen, then it may lead to something we call microglossia. But if they are large, then it may lead to what we call macroglossia. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you find this helpful. Okay, and so now you understand the development of the tongue, and therefore you also link it to, of course, the developmental anomalies that may be associated with them. I'm very grateful for your time this evening. Have a good night, all of you, and may the good Lord richly bless you. Amen.